All right, my friends, it's time for another edition of the Check Engine Club, or us leaky Land Rovers. I don't know. This one's a leaky one. So here's the situation on this 2007 LR3. It's either a 6 or 7. This is a really nice truck. It's got about 140,000 miles on it. It's like cosmetically, like really, really nice. Paint is in really good shape, and I have to document, it's a little hard to see, but you have to trust me when I say I've never seen a dashboard that's been perfect on one of these. So this one must have lived in a garage its entire life, which is great. It has really nice service records. I do have an issue though. This thing is leaking fluid, leaking coolant, and I don't mean like a drip. It's like pouring out. So it's going to be something real obvious. So what we're going to do in this video is document how to find that, what to do, where to look, and the mystery is sort of going to probably present itself pretty quickly. What we'll do is just a quick synopsis of what I expect to do. We'll take the air box out, all the air intake. One thing I noticed right away, I have a check engine light for a lean code. Well, this is not tight on here, and then this has a big gap in it. So I'm sure air is, getting in past the mass airflow sensor, which is throwing things off. So that hopefully is an easy fix. The other thing I see is looks probably need a brake switch, a brake light switch, which is again a pretty easy thing to fix. So taking all this apart, we're going to take the fan shroud off. We're going to introduce some pressure into here, which should then push the liquid out, the coolant out, and then hopefully we can see where the issue is. All right, you just need a drill with a longer Phillips head screw. Some of these are down in here, and they're a little hard to get to. If you're trying to use a screw gun, you need a longer extension on there. So pretty easy to do. We're going to disconnect this. It's just a pinch with your thumb and kind of a gentle snug pull back there. And we're already making progress. This airbox should come right out. All right, next, this little breather vent needs to come undone. Again, it's just a pinch and a little bit of a tug towards the back of the vehicle. Since we know this was already loose, there's really nothing else connecting it, so this should just basically wiggle loose here and hopefully come right off. There we go. Set that aside. All right, now we have access to the top part of the engine. I've seen it where down in here, see where that little bit of brass is? That's the engine coolant temperature sensor. If those aren't seated properly, you can get a lot of coolant leak from there. It doesn't appear to me that it is loose in any way, and I'll be honest with you, it looks like this might actually be a new unit here, so that's interesting. So this kind of plastic part that leads to the radiator and off the other side, that might be new. So we're gonna find that out here shortly. Okay, next we're gonna move the fan shroud. Sometimes I think I remember seeing Phillips screws in here, but otherwise they're just little pinch clips. You can usually get them loose just by pulling up on them gently on either side here and here. It came right out actually for me, so just release the coolant line here and be able to get this unit out right here. All right, so since we've got the shroud out, next thing we need to do is disconnect this fan. There's an electrical connector that goes on the front there, and that runs over to here where this plug is here. And it's a pretty easy unplug, basically. This whole thing should lift right up out of there, and then it gets a little easier to pinch this and then pull it out. I might even be able to do it with one hand. There we go. So that just comes right out. We'll lay this back here so it's out of the way. And that'll allow us then to remove the fan completely when it comes out. So down in here, this could get a little tricky. It looks like someone, had a little bit of a moment with it, perhaps. It was maybe a little fussy at some point to get out. So you can see the bolts and everything looks like they have some wear on it. So somebody at one point in time maybe put a new fan in here, or I'm suspecting there's maybe a leak on the water pump. I have no idea, but looks like this was off. Just for your record, this will go clockwise. So it's the opposite. It's not right tight. It is left. It is left tight, right loose. So it's the opposite thread. So we're going to get I think it's a 36 millimeter that goes on right there. And then with any luck, we can knock it loose. But if not, then we have to kind of get a special tool to hold on to these bolts on either side. Let's see if I can get my finger in there. Right there, that one, and then that one. That tool then will hold those steady while you try to knock it loose again. All right, for that job, I actually like this wrench way better than the thinner ones. The reason is that, see how thick that is? That really grabs that nut firmly. The only issue I don't like with this is I wish it were a little longer, because if you do whack it with a hammer, you got to be really careful not to hit like this, or you know, you don't want to hit the fan. So I just like it because it definitely grips onto that nut down there way better, and just gives you like that much more leverage. Now, interestingly, I can't even get a bite on it. All right, I'll be right back. Yeah, so somebody definitely has kind of marred up this bolt down here, this nut, where this 36 millimeter is supposed to go on pretty easily. I had to actually hammer it on with a dead blow hammer straight down on it so that it would grab it. But we're going to give it a shot here, and let's see if we get lucky. And let's see what happens here. Doesn't feel like it's coming loose. No, it isn't. So it's a job I need to do with two hands, so I'll come back to you here in a moment. Okay, I got it loose, but I did have to employ another tool. This is super handy. I always went to my local auto parts store and would kind of borrow these. They rent them out to you, so to speak. As long as you bring it back, they give you your money back, so it's a nice thing to have. But I was using these so much that I just decided to buy one. They're kind of expensive if I remember correctly, but this is great because what it does is this angle right here at the top, that holds on to these nuts that are back here. You can see it right here. These ones right here. Holds on to that housing and then allows you to turn the nut. So once I got that wrench back on, and then this tool to hold the back part where the pulley is, it just pops right off. So hopefully that makes it an easier job for you. Okay, next all we have to do is spin this. Again, as you look at the front of the engine, you're gonna spin it clockwise. But let's do something here to be safe, and I'll be right back. All right, I'm back, and what we're gonna do is just gonna slide a piece of cardboard in here. The reason for that is you want to be really, really careful. You have an exposed radiator. These things are really, really sensitive to the slightest little bump. So if you just slide a piece of cardboard down in here, I happen to have one that's round, so it fits almost perfectly in there. When we go to then spin this out of here like this, if you happen to not expect that it's going to fall, it could just jam right into the radiator, and then you've got a leak there, and you got that problem to deal with. So really, it's pretty easy. You just unspin this. Again, we're going the opposite direction that you would think, but you can see that the nut down below here is spinning. I think the camera angle actually shows that, so pretty easy to do. There we go. That comes out, and then since we already unplugged it, the whole unit comes out, and there you go. All right, now the reason that we want to take this all apart is we really do need access to understand where this leak is coming from. It could be the water pump, and I'll show you where that is. It's kind of in here a bit. It's right there. In order to get to that, you've got to take a couple of the other pulleys off. So this thing has two serpentine belts. The one on the front is reasonably easy to get to. It only has 3 pulleys that it connects to. The crankshaft, this one, and this one down here. Oops, sorry, these two, 1, 2, 3. So once you release the tension here, you can get this one off pretty easily. And that gives you a little bit more freedom to see in like what's going on, where this leak might be coming from. So before we do go into that, I'm gonna just put some pressure into the tank right here, and maybe we can see something at the top. These plastic parts right here, they can be pretty brittle, and you just never know. There could be a crack in the housing here somewhere, and you know, if we get lucky, I don't know if I'll call it that, but if you get a little bit lucky, you know, the crack could just be, you know, right at the top here, and then we'll just remove the throttle body to get to that, and hopefully, you know, it's something we can see pretty easily. All right, first, if you're wondering, I have a snow broom in here holding up the bonnet or the hood because the gas charged shocks have failed on this. So I didn't expect that when I opened this up. So this was the only thing I had laying around from the winter. So that's what that is if you're wondering. So what you need is basically a pressure tester. And these kits are pretty reasonable on Amazon. So they come with a bunch of different caps depending on what your vehicle is. I don't know which one is which, but it's sort of trial and error. This one looked like it fit in there snugly. And, you know, you just screw it on tight, and we're not really doing anything, but we just want to introduce some pressure into this so we can figure out where the leak is coming from. So you may have some trial and error as to which one fits. And if you wanted to like see if this holds pressure after we're done, you want to make sure that this is the right cap so it's not leaking out around here, the air. You know, want to make, there's like 2 or 3 of them that actually fit on the threads. And again, I don't know which is the right one, but maybe we can look that up later. Again, these are pretty simple to use. Basically, that plugs into the nipple that sticks out of the top of the cap and runs down to this device here, which is in essence just a pump. You don't want to exceed 16 pounds per square inch, 16 PSI. And really it shows you that right there in black. Once you hit that 15, you're going into, you know, that's too much pressure. You don't want to blow anything out here. So once you're refilling and you get this up to 15 or 16, that's the maximum. But anyway, let's pump this up and see what happens. Interesting. It was a pretty big coolant leak. You can see by this, it is not even holding anything. So it could be one of 2 things. 1, the cap isn't correct, or 2, there's a pretty big leak, which I think it's the latter. I think there's a huge leak in this vehicle. So I'm suspecting that either the water pump has failed, or like I said, this area in here where it's all plastic, it gets pretty brittle and has 140,000 miles. So you know, this is the first place I lean is towards the plastic stuff. Okay, so I'm just doing a little bit of investigative poking around here with a really bright flashlight. I can see that orange bit down there. There's some coolant, definitely in the valley. So I don't know if that's because the fan maybe blew it back or where it's coming from, but you know, down in here there's a bunch of plastic housing pieces that I'm going to just suspect that's the case. So it's not really that difficult to take the throttle body off to get a better look. So we're going to start with really just this this connector here, this electrical connector. These always break, so just be mindful of that. I wonder if I just snapped it. Yeah, there we go. I think it's okay. That little piece in there on these, every time I remove them on any one of these LR3s or any Rover like this, they always snap. They get real brittle, but it's not the end of the world if it does. I can show you how you fix that if it happens. Next thing is this, again, this breather. Just pushing down on here should allow this to come off, and you just push down. You might have to grab it from both sides. Yeah, there we go. Comes right off like that. And you know, if the engine's been running, you might have some hot coolant, so you've got to be mindful that you don't want to burn yourself. So make sure you wear gloves and do the right things here. But basically going to take these 4 bolts off this throttle body. There's a couple of little connectors for the throttle body heater plate that go underneath. So there could be some remaining coolant in here. I doubt it though, because this thing's pretty empty. But you know, just be careful of that. I always have a catch pan underneath. If I didn't mention that, it's down there and underneath. I'll tell you that it's also helpful if you can jack your suspension up. So put it to the high settings if that's if you're able to reach the engine that way. That way it just gives you a little bit more room to stick your head or hand under there safely, and make sure that there's you can kind of see where the leaks are coming from. Sometimes there's usually a pan down there though that it leaks out of the back of the pan or the side of the pan, so sometimes it's hard to determine where the leak is coming from because that pan, you just don't know. So anyway, we're going to take this top part off and just see what we find. And I forgot to mention, there's these 4 bolts right here. They're 8 millimeters, and there's 4 of them. There's the one at the bottom there. I'll tell you that these can be in there sometimes. If this ever hasn't been apart, this housing is aluminum. The threads that it goes into right here are aluminum, and these bolts are steel. So sometimes there's electrolysis that happens. They can be a little fussy getting out. So you want to be real careful. Do not use a machine on this. You want to use a socket with an extension probably, just because you want to get a feel for this bolt when it comes out. If it's really, really tight, then I'd hit this with some penetrating spray right in here and let it sit for a while, and then hopefully that would kind of loosen things up. Last thing you want to do is break off a bolt inside of here, and then you got bigger problems. You got to replace the whole housing. We've gotten the throttle body off, and these can give you kind of some problems sometimes when they're real dirty. It's hard to see there. That's a little better angle, but this is definitely a good idea to clean this up. I've gotten so frustrated with cleaning them sometimes. You can buy a brand new one. They're actually pretty cheap. I think I remember under $40 for this whole throttle body brand new. It actually made a big difference on one of these I worked on in the last year. So you can clean it and try that. Otherwise I gave up because it just was giving me fits, and I just got a new one, and that solved the problem. Next we're going to remove the 2 cooling lines that are here, and I'll show you where those are. These are right here. These 2 little hoses, one here and one there, and they connect to the bottom of this right there. So you can just disconnect those 2. And they're really simple. They're just pinches. So I get a pair of pliers or a pair of vice grips and pinch those, and then you just slide the hose off. Okay, the throttle body is off. You look down in there and wow, there's some decent corrosion way down in there. It's a little hard to see, but a couple of these things look pretty dirty to me. So we're gonna definitely, like that area right there, I'm not sure where that is coming from, but that's really carboned up. So I'm guessing that we'll do a nice cleanup in here. That should improve performance. This thing actually runs great. I just noticed that it was leaking coolant pretty bad. So I took it down the road and saw that pretty quickly. But it starts right up, and like they all do, these are great engines. All right, so I'm moving on. I think the problem is actually back towards the back of the engine. I've never had this on one of them. So basically I've taken my hose, I fill up the reservoir. I can literally hear water running out. And when I looked at the pan underneath, it appears to be coming from the back of the pan, and then it leaks out of the front. So interesting. This is a new one for me. So we're gonna have to maybe get this thing up in the air, take the pans off, the skid plates, and see what else we can discover here. This is a interesting case. I'm hoping that we don't have to take the upper intake off here, but I'm gonna suspect that we will. All right, after a little sleuthing on the internet, and actually some very helpful people on both Facebook and Land Rover forums, they suggested that the issue is probably this hose right here. So this connects into the thermostat, runs back here. This is your bleeder valve to get the air out. and then it runs back down. It's really hard to see, but it's back behind the throttle body here, and it's got kind of a hook back into this plastic right underneath this throttle body intake here. So we've got to remove this right here, the rest of the throttle body intake, into the upper intake. And there are 4, again, 8mm. So you can see one right there, right there. No problem on that one. These ones on the bottom are a little tricky. I've had to do this before. It's way down in there. And you've got to come in from like underneath here with a long extension to get that one. It needs to be on like a wobble socket. So something like this, it'll move back and forth a little bit. Maybe even a universal wobble. These are a little tricky. Same thing with this side. You know, there's 2 more bolts that hold this thing in, and then it should come right off, I think. So anyway, I'll document it and I'll let you know. So I had to resort to just a little bit of maneuvering here. So these yellow pliers are really just holding back this the shielding here. It just got, sorry, you can't really see it, but when I move my hand, you see that, like kind of that, it's just, I don't know, it's heat shielding or something. But anyway, it was in the way of where the socket is. So just FYI, you have to really sneak way under the thermostat here, go way under it, hit an extension and a little bit of a wobble socket, and then you should be able to break it loose. To get the last bottom bolt out of here is a real challenge. I don't even think I can get the angle here. I mean, it is so far down in there. The only way to do it is to get a socket in, again, under the thermostat housing and really under this T-pipe right here. The problem is the T-pipe is in the way for the angle that you need. So it looks like I might be able to loosen right underneath the main coolant hose here. There's a tiny little 8mm down in there. See if I can get a light on it better. Anyway, it's down in there. There it is. Can't get to it because the coolant pipe itself is in the way. So I have a boxed ratcheting wrench, 5/16 and 8mm are pretty close, so it should work. But this is the only way to do it, is one of these guys. All right, well, I could not get that bolt off. It just seized in there and it started to strip. I got an 8mm on it anyway, and again, just a problem. So what I did is just disconnected this, the T-part, the hose here, and that'll allow me to then get access in to that really awkward bolt. Yeah, that did the trick. Moving that pipe out of the way just allowed enough access to get a socket on there, which is way down in there. You can see right there. And then when I turn it, a little hard to see, but you can see I'm on the bolt. This one was really stubborn, and I almost thought I was going to strip the head on it, which I don't know what kind of nightmare that would have been. So I would say make sure your socket is on there really well before you start turning, because this one was a tough one. It took a bit, and then it finally like snapped loose. If I remember correctly, there's like these, I'll show you, I guess, once I get this apart, but the way these thread in, they go into metal sleeves, and those sleeves then are seated in the plastic in here, in the plastic intake. And if I remember correctly, once taking this apart on another vehicle, that sleeve ended up slipping. It just didn't grip the plastic enough, and then it basically didn't extract. So hopefully that's not what's happening here. I'll report back here, and then I'll show you once I get this out. Well, I guess while I'm at it, one other little tip, I'm gonna assume that bolt is never gonna come out with the socket itself. So I had this magnetic thing that's meant to retrieve, you know, tools and bolts and things when you drop them into places you can't really get to. I'm gonna fish this down in and under that bolt. Like I said, I have this suspicion it's gonna fall, so let's just plan for that, and hopefully this magnet will catch it. All right, well, I discovered another problem. This is, I just wiggled the intake here and this came loose. This is, I can't remember if this is the idle air control valve or what this is, but there is the reason why I had a lean code. I am now 100% sure. Wow, okay. At least I got something else to look at here and put back together. Interesting. Well, unfortunately, what I thought would happen is actually happening. So let's see if I can get a light on this. Basically, a little hard to see, but see, maybe I can do it better at the top. Yeah, there we go. So here, check this out. So in the plastic housing, right here, there's like a metal grommet where the bolt comes through here and threads into there. So what's happened on that bottom one, where of course it's the hardest one to get to, this metal grommet is just spinning inside of the plastic housing and the bolt is not coming out. So nothing is easy. Nothing is easy. All right. Usually I don't get frustrated, but like this is a dishonest seller. Frustrates me in a big way, and to have to fix stuff they, you know, don't disclose, they don't tell you the truth. It's really frustrating. I try to not be that kind of seller myself. I try to tell everyone every single thing that's wrong, and if there's a major problem, I don't sell the vehicle. It's frustrating. All right, I'm done ranting. I gotta get this fixed. All right, that was a lot of fighting. I did finally get it out. I think part of the problem was that my socket also was caught on something. So when the bolt was trying to extract itself, the socket was stopping it from coming out this way because of something back behind here, which I can't see yet. All right, so the next thing is we need to take out the intake. And that's this big plastic chunk right here. And I might even go ahead and get a new one of those. Oh, by the way, I just disconnected this. This is the temperature, coolant temperature sensor. And really that's held in just by one little clip like this. You can see that clip. That clip pulls out of here, straight up. And once you do, it just comes straight out the back, okay? Keep in mind that, again, if you're working with a system that's fully charged with coolant, that you will have a lot of spillage at that point. So make sure you drain your coolant, preferably at the bottom here. But if you've lost it like I have, there's no coolant in the system anyway. So, all right, more to come. The proper bit, this is called a Torx bit. Hopefully it goes into focus here in a second. There you go. And that bit right there is a T30, T30. And in essence, that fits right into these bolts right there. And there's a handful of them around. So there's 4 on the top here, 1 here, 1 on the bottom here, which is going to be tricky to get to. And there's, and again, a little hard to see, but there's 1 there. And then there's 1 on the bottom. So I think there are 8 total. If there are any more, I will let you know where they are. All right, so this little, I didn't expect this. I thought this was all 1 piece, but apparently it's 2. I can, you know, reseal that back up, or I might, like I said, just get a whole new one. These two tend to fail. So I might just go ahead and get a new one. But so way down in there is where I think I've been told the culprit could be. So that hose that leads off the back side, that port down there leads into that hose. Looks to me like there's, you know, a little bit of access to get to that hose clamp. I guess if we pop that off, push it towards the back of the engine, hopefully it'll come off. I don't know. We'll give it a try and let's see if we can get that thing off and then evaluate it. It's really the only area where I think, you know, coolant could be leaking from. So hopefully that's it. All right, day 2 on this. I've got the new hose delivered, and I've basically been able to fish it down underneath it. Kind of makes like a U-turn, so it goes like this and then back around. Maybe a little bit more accurate with the screwdriver. So basically it goes down here and back underneath the intake a little bit, and then makes another turn and then comes back in, similar to this hose, but basically it's way down in there. Let's see if I can get a zoom in on that for you. So that's the end of the rubber part that connects to the back of this right here. There's an outlet. You can see that male part of the outlet. It goes back there. I'm in the process of trying to get this thing on there. It is very tight, and because I've chosen to leave the upper intake on, it is definitely a challenge. I've been working on it an hour and I've only gotten this far. So I'll let you know exactly what I end up doing here to get this. That was, you know, less than fun, but I did get it in there. So what I had to do though, is you can see the silver hose clamp. Basically I had to revert to this stainless hose clamp. The pinch clamp, there's just not enough room between here and here to really get anything on it, any kind of tool, any kind of hose clamp tool, any vice grips, any needle nose pliers. It's just at a really weird angle. Like if you come straight down on it, you can see that there's just no clearance there. You can come in at an angle, I guess if you had a bent, maybe 22.5 degree bent pair of needle nose, which I didn't have, you could have maybe done it. Long story short is I fought this thing for quite a while and I had to revert to a traditional hose clamp. So I tightened it down. I have access to it from this angle right, well, you know, over this way. And I cranked it down, and like I said, it's stainless, so it's not gonna rust. That's a good thing. So if something needs to be repaired later on down the line, somebody can get that off pretty easily. So moving on to putting this thing back together now. I did go to the effort of getting a whole new thermostat housing system. It includes the engine temperature control, and it has the built-in new thermostat as well. This little yellow piece right here, interestingly, when I took this apart, it wasn't on there. I don't think you can buy that clamp by itself. So to put this back together, I was thinking I might zip tie it, and then I thought, you know, I've gone to all this effort. I do not want to have to do this job again. Let's just get the whole new part in here and be done with it. So I'm excited to get the new piece in here, and that'll replace this whole unit here. But should be pretty easy to do, and we'll get right on it. All right, dielectric grease is a good friend here to have. These mating surfaces, they're rubber, and I don't know if this is the right thing to do or not, but I'm pretty sure it's a good idea. This way you get a really clean seal. I've wiped off these areas where the rubber gaskets touch, these 1, 2, 3 areas, and then I'll do this green ring here around when I go to put the throttle body back together. But this is a good thing to do. Again, I've had good luck with this in the past where it just prevents anything from leaking, or if there's any kind of gap in there in any way, shape, or form, this will definitely seal it up. So just a top tip, at least it works for me, dielectric grease. Getting ready now to put the throttle body back in. Now I've left these pipes here in the front undone because if you remember, to get into these bottom ones, a little tougher if the pipes are put back together. So we'll do that probably last or near last. So to prevent any kind of seizure with the bolts that go in through the throttle body and into the upper intake, I've decided to put a little bit of anti-seize just on the outside of these. So when you screw in, it'll draw some of the anti-seize in. And then finally I did around this green O-ring, I did the dielectric grease again. Finally, I cleaned up the mating surface here with kind of a, I think they call them cookies. Basically, it's a little very light grade, small little, it's like 2 or 3 inch diameter grinding wheel. You put it on the end of your drill, and again, it's not a strong abrasive, just enough to get the gunk off here so you have a good mating surface. You don't want to get a real tough or very coarse grinding wheel because it'll dig into this aluminum and you don't want that. So just get the junk off of it. Lastly, I did clean up as best I could inside of here. It looks better than it did, especially down in this port. There's a lot of crusted up, like carbon and so forth. I've got that cleaned up. And then lastly, the throttle body itself, I did the same thing. I basically cleaned up as best I could. I'm going to go over this with that little grinding wheel again, just to make sure that the surfaces are on this side anyway, are mated up nicely. And don't forget, I don't know if I mentioned this, but when you take it apart, there is this gasket here that goes right back in. I typically, again, I'll use some very light grease, probably the dielectric grease again, just to create an airtight, so there's no leak in any way, shape, or form. I'll probably do it here on this. I think this is the idle air control valve. It's just slipping my mind for whatever reason, but I'll do that on here as well after I clean it up. So any little surface that can take that light grease just to give it a good seal, I'm going to continue to use that. Okay, getting this back together, you always want to make sure you go slow and you do it right, and you take your time. Last thing you want to do is drop the bolts down in. So another little top tip, hopefully this helps you. And again, another use for dielectric grease, but basically I put dielectric grease on the end of these bolts. And let me see if I can do this with one hand. So, yeah, hang on one second here. Okay, so get the dielectric grease on the end of the nut, the bolt right like that, okay? Then what it'll do is it'll nicely stick inside of your socket, right? Just like that. It's not anything obtrusive, but it'll kind of now allow it to stick in there and stay there so that when you fish it in, hopefully it does not drop. And because this one is, I can't remember where we go in, but you got to be real careful. And I really want 2 hands, so I'm going to have to put the phone down. See if I Okay, there we go. So it's sticking in there nice. Now we just got to gently put it into position. And there you go. So now it's kind of in its home, and we just need to thread it in gently by hand. I've been trying to find the torque settings on these, and didn't want to go crazy gorilla strength torque down on these. They're just not necessary. It might be 6 or 8 foot-pounds, but I'll definitely tell you what that is here in the description if I can locate it. But anyway, once you get those 4 bolts back in, you're kind of in business. So I'm going to go ahead and hook up the temperature sensor, and this goes right in. Should just click right in. This is a new temperature sensor. So what I'm a little anxious of, if I have to take this part apart, it won't be a big deal, but what I get anxious is if it's not OEM, I don't know how these things will operate. So hopefully it is going to function, and if not, I have the original one. I'll just pop it right back in. So it's as easy as just clipping it back on, and there you go. That's on. I've got a couple of these vacuum hoses. Might as well click those back into place and get that one on. And until you hear the click, you know it's in nice and tight. So we're getting there, and we're gonna probably put some of these hoses back here now. Get this up out of the way for a second. But these are gonna route then into the bottom of the throttle body right here and here. And so that should be pretty easy. This guy right here, this new hose that we got. Oh, I should have rerouted that. So let me fix that. So that goes underneath this one. Easy fix. There we go. Just goes right under. And then that back on. Okay. And then this goes right in here like so. And while I'm thinking of it, I might as well pinch these tight so I don't forget to do it later. So I just take a pair of needle nose pliers. Okay, when getting the hoses back on the bottom of the throttle body heater plate, they were actually a little trickier than I remembered. I had them on backwards. You'll know that if it's backwards because it just won't seat on here properly. Like the one hose will be like sticking up in here, and the other hose is cattywampus. It just doesn't sit right. Well, when you get them on the right way and the hoses are tucked in the way they should be, the thing just mates right up. So just be mindful of that. I don't really think it matters. Well, maybe it does, but it goes on one way, and try to figure that out. But hopefully this will help you understand which one goes where. So hopefully that helps. Everything I think is basically buttoned up from a coolant perspective. So I know this sounds a little funny, but I tend to start looking everywhere at everything all at once, and that's not helpful. So I use this spotlight in my hand, and I literally go through every single thing that I've touched that I can see. And that way, for whatever reason, maybe it's ADD, I don't know, but I can then just concentrate on just where the light is, and that allows me to make sure that I have everything properly put together. Now, for example, I was using this method a moment ago, and I missed this hose clamp. It was down, so that would have been bad. Once the system built with pressure, would have probably blown that hose off. So everything is pretty tightened up. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start filling this with coolant. I have high hopes that I don't hear anything running out, because that was the big part of it that was interesting, was the you could literally hear it running out. It was that big of a crack. So we're going to do that, and I'm going to just start listening. Okay, so far so good. It's been perfectly quiet. I hear a little bit of gurgling in the engine as it starts to fill and find its way through the cavities. The only thing I can hear is the humming of the fluorescent lights and my tinnitus. That's great. Okay, so what I'm going to do next, we're going to do the pressure test again. So with the new hose came this new valve. Unfortunately, they still stuck with plastic, but it's brand new, so it should last a while. I have the cap completely off here, so it's a breather. And what I want to do again is put pressure on the system, not exceeding 16 pounds. And hopefully it starts to push a little bit of fluid out of here. Then I'll put the cap on and see if it holds pressure. Okay, I think everything was a success here. It seemed to hold pressure. I got it up to about 12 pounds, and it was holding. So I didn't hear anything escaping or leaking out, which was very good. So I filled it up properly with the correct fluid. I know it was completely flushed because it was almost completely empty, and I had run a lot of water through it anyway. So we're using the proper European kind of pinkish looking fluid for European engines, aluminum blocks. I can't remember if it's HOAT, H-O-A-T, or OAT, O-A-T. But either way, I looked it up, and it's the right fluid, the right coolant. Now what's left is just really putting the air intake system back on, which is pretty straightforward with the air box and the mass airflow sensor and everything here. So I'll make sure that's put together nice and tight, and we'll get the fan on and plug back in, and we're gonna take this out for a test drive. Everything is back together. I realized, I think this came without an engine cover, but I might have a spare one laying around here. But anyway, the engine cover would go over this just to kind of pretty it up. It's just for looks only, has really no other function. It's a good idea to have it on just so debris and so forth doesn't get down into the engine. So if you were thinking about not putting that back on, please do. One other point I want to make is, again, these hose clamps need to be really firmly tight, but not over tight, because they can tend to, especially this one, it'll push it, it just pinches it off the sleeve here where it needs to go. So firm, but not like overly tight. And the last thing to check, which I've not done, is this guy right here, the oil filler neck. After years of like untwisting it, it can actually turn it counterclockwise, which will loosen it down here. So what you want to do is put the thing back on and give it a good crank to the right, like righty-tighty. Oh, look at that. So, I mean, you don't want to break the thing off, right? But you want to give it a good enough twist that if there was a vacuum leak there, that could be causing a lean coat as well. So just keep that in mind. Make sure that's nice and tight. Double check all of your hoses and connectors and make sure they're routed the right way. You don't want things rubbing on things. Just do a couple of checks over, and with any luck, we'll get this thing started up and it holds pressure and doesn't leak out, and hopefully problem solved.